Kroger, when we talk about AI, data science, you guys have been using this for decades. I mean, we talked about this earlier.
Yes.
How has it advanced over the years, and how are you finding it the most useful?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we did start well over a decade, and I think I'll take you on a little bit of the journey that we've been on. So we really started with descriptive analytics, and that was where we were looking in the rearview mirror, looking at historical data, and figuring out insights that could inform the customer experience and how to optimize the operational performance of the company. We then moved on to predictive, where we were leveraging AI and machine learning to basically say, what do we think is going to happen? And you can imagine that then expanding into forecasting, supply chain optimization, other parts of the company. The prescriptive phase, which we are now in and deeply embedded in, is really taking those predictions and having prescriptive recommendations around what is the most important thing to do. And I'll give you a perfect example of how that comes to life. So we have hundreds of thousands of associates in our stores who are making decisions every day. You heard Seth talk about it before in terms of in-stock and management. Making sure you are prioritizing those tasks to do the most important work first is a great way to actually leverage this technology and capability that's available. The next thing I would say just very quickly is real-time decision making. So think about the digital experience. We talked a little bit about that before. Within the digital experience, we have millions of customers who are building a basket, placing an order, critical items that they need for their home. When we look at what is actually available and sometimes have to make a substitution, how do we do that in the most effective way to still meet their needs, get them the product that they want? That is all that real-time decision making. So incredible journey over that decade, but the progression has been really exciting, and where we're headed next is probably going to be the most exciting chapter so far.
We're definitely going to touch on that, so okay, hold that point there. Hari, when we spoke earlier, you talked about this high-tech, high-touch approach. So if you can explain what you meant by that and get into how you're leveraging technology at Bank of America.
Sure. So while people may like to go grocery shopping, nobody likes to go banking, right? So, our strategy all along is offering world-class high-tech solutions, because we believe customers eventually will want to do things themselves. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On the other hand, we want to be there for them when they need help. So high-tech is fully digital. High-touch is, someone helping you. The problem is the fact that high-tech costs us pennies. High-touch costs us tens of dollars every interaction. So the question becomes, how do you transition customers so they actually find it easy, simple, faster, cheaper, better to go high-tech? And the good news for us has been the last 6 years, we've gone from 80% of our transactions being high-tech to 99% of our transactions being high-tech. So we've made that transition along with our customers. And the way we've done that is simply, first, traditional digitization, make things available on that mobile phone, things that you can do yourself. But the second thing is, instead of jamming a bunch of stuff in there, how do you make it easier for people to use that application? And that's where AI came in for us. And two parts to it. One, interacting in a much more natural language. Having expectations that people are going to hunt and peck and go 3 levels down a menu, people aren't going to do that. So being able to talk in a human voice. And 7 years ago, we launched Erica. We now have 2 billion transactions on Erica where customers just come in and talk in a human language. They want to pay a bill. They owe someone money. They want to see how much they spent on groceries. They can do all that through the power of natural language. Second, predictive insights that makes you say, hey, someone's watching over my financials. So personalization, something that tells you, hey, did you notice that your gym membership price just went up 20%? Did you even know that? It's like, oh, I didn't know that. I probably wouldn't have seen it till maybe the end of the month. Maybe it would have slipped through the cracks. But now I have something that's analytically looking at my transaction and providing that. So this combination of digitization, natural language, and predictive insights is what's driven the transition from 80% to 99% for us.
Full disclosure, I have to say, Erica is my BFF.
All right. Love it. I'll sell you the money later.
Thank you. Ravi, you talked about wanting to meet the customer where they want to be serviced. So explain that and how you're using technology to leverage that.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Great to be here and have this opportunity to talk to all of you. When you think of American Express, you probably think of customer service, and customer-focused innovation has been in our DNA for a very long time. And we think about our goal is to provide the world's best customer service. And it's not just the digital customer service. It could be in moments of truth, like Hari said, when someone wants to be on a phone, wants to talk to somebody. So we think about this as meeting the customers where they want to be, where they are. And this is increasingly digital, like you heard from other panelists. So we've invested a lot in our digital technologies, from mobile to chat, and have injected AI and Gen AI into those. But it's also being proactive. And if we suspect that there is possible fraud activity on your account, we'll send you a message, either in the app or we will text you. That's like meeting customers in their real life where they are on something that they care about. But in those moments of truth, the customer care professionals, as we call it, we equip them with technology to provide the best possible service. This is like technology-powered relationship servicing, as we call it. And I'll give you a quick example on each. If you call our travel counselor assist, they have AI and Gen AI technology that helps them give you faster, more personalized, more relevant type of travel itineraries if you're calling them, and there's Gen AI behind that. If you happen to talk to one of our service professionals, they have access to Gen AI summarization of not only the current call as it's happening, but also prior conversations. People often call for a problem that they had before, and this just makes it more delightful for the customer not to have to repeat what they just said before in a prior call. So these are some examples of ways in which we think that the mission is to provide the world's best customer experience, largely digital, powered by technology, but it is ultimately about the relationship.
And Jody, I want to get into you about how it's changing things, how it's changing the way your associates work, how it's changing the customer experience. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that has been, and I love what you said about putting the customer at the forefront, because really, technology, as Seth said, should not be leading the discussion. The customer needs, the associate needs are really what should be leading the discussion. And so from a customer, through the customer lens, personalizing the experience so that it is seamless for customers to accomplish their goals has been a huge priority for us. We are leveraging a massive data asset and putting both AI and machine learning on top of that so that we can serve up, I mean, this is sort of an outstanding number, but about 2 trillion personalized recommendations every year to customers. And it's something as simple as making sure when you're searching for milk on Kroger, if you're someone who drinks oat milk, you're going to see oat milk, right? So how do you, in such a busy world that we live in, remove any of those points of friction to help consumers accomplish their goals? That's one way across our digital experience where it's coming to life. On the associate side, as I mentioned before, we have a huge associate base, and there are these very manual, sort of repeatable processes that have to happen to run a company like Kroger. We are working to automate as many of those as possible, and what happens when you do that is you transform both the, sort of efficiency of the company in terms of how you can do things like having associates check their schedule and so forth, but you also enhance the job for the associate or for the employee. They now have had friction removed. The work that they get to do every day gets sort of elevated to something where it's either engaging and serving customers, working more strategically. So we're really seeing very strong benefits on both the consumer and associate side.
What about routing trucks? I mean, there's so many
Yes, perfect examples. So you can imagine the intersection of, think of a delivery order. Right. So you're placing a grocery delivery order. You have all of this wonderful technology that's helping a customer build a basket, create, the trip that they need to accomplish. At the same time, we're needing to look at the routing of all the orders from customers in a certain geography so that we can optimize getting it to them as efficiently and as quickly as possible. Both are great examples of the technology serving the customer need and the business need.
Now, Hari, how do you find that right mix? We were talking about Erica. How do you find that right mix of human and machine at the same time?
Yeah, a couple of points, and we'll talk about routing something else, which is incoming phone calls. Right?
Yes,
so,
yes.
So you get into a situation where at some point you call. Okay. The first thing is, can you actually predict why the customer will be calling? And the answer is, with the 360 view, you have your customers. You should have a sense that it's most probably Hari, because it's the last couple of numbers he called in from. I just noticed there's a fraud alert to Ravi's example. Okay. And the chances are he's calling about that. So can I just offer him an option to just ping him back and saying, hey, I can offer you a real-time message on your app that you can take care of yourself. So you don't even need to talk to a human being. Not because we don't want to talk to you, but it's faster and cheaper and simpler for you to take care of it. But assuming you get past that, then the question becomes, how do you route now to the agent who's actually going to be able to help you the fastest? And then when you get to that agent, how do you look at the call summarization, look at all the information, and put it in the hands of the agent to actually help you as effectively? As we went down the journey, we realized customers love certain parts of it, but some of it they aren't as comfortable with. So you have to always listen. You have to look at sentiment analysis. You can look at that through understanding the Erica interactions. Like, what was the sentiment? Task completion. When someone started to do something, did they get lost? Did they get stuck in a loop? So it's really important to actually mine the information as customers interact with you. And finally, customer satisfaction surveys, good old-fashioned things. We actually survey our customers on a regular basis. And we've taken our top 2-box satisfaction. Customers who give us 9 or 10 out of 10, from about 54% about 7 years ago to 89% now. And a lot of that is because, again, this constant listening to, I think both of you mentioned customer. Listening to customers, seeing the sentiments of the interaction, understanding what they're telling you, explicitly asking them, and then fine-tuning and iterating your platform to cater to their needs.
If you don't mind me building on that, I think the customer piece is so critical, but you also hit on something else that I just wanted to sort of underscore, which is continuous optimization. So I think Seth mentioned it before, you're never done. Right? So always listening to the data, the signals, and understanding that when you're building these experiences, you have to be committed to always continually optimizing, whether it's your actual models or the experience itself. But the mindset of projects that launch and you're done and it's launch and leave, those days are over if you want to get full value from the business.
And I like how you bring that up and I like how you continue to survey your customers, because sometimes you do get, I'm not saying it's not with Bank of America, but you're talking with someone, you're like, representative, I've had enough. Like, just get me.
A big part of what we want to do is never a dead end, right? There should never be a dead end. There's always, and one of the things we added, for example, is chat. Because we felt is rather than pick up the phone and now talk to someone, what if you had Erica chat, and you said, like, no, I really want to talk to a person. Or we think you need a human. Let's bring the human into a chat session right there. Both of you see where you stand. Help out. Step out, the human steps out, and then Erica. So it all kind of has to blend seamlessly. It's not either or, it's the and that comes together.
Exactly. Ravi, I want to get to you. You talked about different advantages, what it's doing to help out, but I'm sure it's not always easy. I mean, what are some of the roadblocks that you faced along the way, and what kind of advice can you give to people sitting out here who maybe say, you know what, we've tried it, we've dipped our toe in the water, now we want to jump in. So what advice can you give?
It's a great question, Lisa. I'll probably start with just how we approached it. We approached it by first recognizing, at least in the context of Gen AI, it is a secular change. It is something that's going to have impact. The timeline of its impact and the extent of the impact can be hard to predict, but you kind of have the conviction that that's something important to do. We also had a conviction we needed to test and learn, and we wanted to figure out what was most important to get right. I know Seth ended the last session by talking about governance. I'd probably broaden it by saying, what's the framework by which you're going to do these experiments, you're going to test and learn. So from the beginning, we had colleagues from legal compliance, as much as we had colleagues from digital labs, technology, cybersecurity was at the table. So you're trying to think through, even as you are creating a methodology to test and learn, how are you thinking about the framework of risk? How are you thinking about being assured that what you're doing is not going to cause any inadvertent customer harm? So we call this whole approach as like enterprise enablement, something that focuses on creating reusable component services that allow you to quickly test and learn, swap things out. A different large language model could be better than one you thought was good like a week ago. That's the pace at which things move, if not like in days. So that approach of having a mindset that you're testing and learning, but with an appropriate risk framework, has allowed us to both go fast when we need to, where we think there is value, but also take some time to get some of the risk parameters right. Like we had to take time to build an AI firewall that kind of protects between our people and applications and the large language models that they are working with, as an example. We had to think through, in a highly regulated environment that Hari and I are in, how do we do model governance? What does model governance mean when you're using large language models? So these are things that shouldn't necessarily stop progress, but you do need to figure them out along the way as you're doing this. And we also took an approach on building on top of the frameworks we had. So sometimes there's a temptation to say, this is new, let's create a whole risk framework. We just added on to the frameworks we had before, and we had to do additional things in those. So those are probably some of the examples of the things we did, and I would offer as advice, get that enablement right so you can scale in an appropriate way, as opposed to just get a couple of like quick wins and then you're stuck.
And Lisa, I think one thing when you're talking about scale that is important, and when you talk about a proof of concept or testing and learning, one of the lessons that I think a number of companies are realizing now is, unless you are testing and understanding the cost associated with a proof of concept, you can have a very painful surprise when you hit scale. There is a real cost associated with leveraging technologies like AI, and if you are not planning for that and baking that into your ROI up front, it can be very challenging to actually manage at the scale level. So being really proactive about that,
Not
I think,
to
is
hijack
critical.
the question here, right? But I think that's both the functional costs, but also sometimes non-functional. If your salespeople want a client memo prepared in a second, and they click on demand and want to generate these client memo preps, that's a cost. But most of the time, they're not going to a meeting a second from now. If you just can say, look, I'm going to batch this thing and tomorrow morning it's available to you, that's a completely different cost. So really understanding cost and ROI. It's too early. I know nobody has perfect ROI models, so no one's suggesting there's a magic template. But you can get expensive very fast. And unless you sort of look at both the functional and non-functional needs going into it, you're going to end up with the trough of disillusionment hit you much faster than you think.
Yeah, and I think the foundational components in getting them right and knowing what they are is pretty important. Another one is data. I think the last session that came up. You can do a lot of these other things, but if you don't have a good data platform, good data governance, then you're going to get disappointed pretty quickly.
Yeah, Jody, you spoke about that when we talked earlier about
Yes.
the problem, the difficulties with it.
I mean, working on your upstream, without good data, there is no AI, right? Like you're going to have garbage in, garbage out. So investing upstream in, do you have clean data? Do you have thoughtful data domains where you have a single source of truth in key areas around the company, where it's a one-to-many relationship, is so foundational to this whole dialogue. Without it, you are not going to accomplish the value that you're looking for.
Most definitely. Ravi, what changes do you think need to be made in the future as technology starts to advance? Because we have a question from the audience that kind of goes along with it. How are organizations thinking about evolving training, development for people in the age of AI?
Yeah. I would definitely start by a comment that was made earlier, right? Raising the digital acumen, I would probably extend it to say just raising the AI acumen, right? It's going to come to all roles in all of our enterprises. So ensuring that people are able to take advantage of it, but also know how to protect against the risks of it, right? It's also going to show up in like a risk vector too. So our training approach on this, or our upskilling approach, has been multifaceted, right? You just can't do one thing. There is like structured learning. We've had enterprise learning days on AI. We use Slack internally, so we have Slack channels where lots of people are actively on, and there is AI information there. There is like communities of practice. So I don't think of this upskilling as like one thing you do. It's a variety of things you do, and it's a version of like meeting your employees and colleagues where they are.
Yeah, and Hari, how do you see that developing, internally, in-house? Because sometimes the right skill set people aren't out there yet. It's still an evolving technology. So how do you train those in-house?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces to it. One is even to know what to apply this to.
Okay.
Requires us to understand, because you can easily throw this thing at the most mundane process, right? If someone does content summarization for 0.2% of their time, and you think, wouldn't it be cool to deploy a content summarizer? You could spend $1 gazillion and get 0.2% of like fingers and toes of people. And that's not going to yield outcomes. So I think having the organization sort of understand, first of all, what do we do? What are our activities? What are our tasks? And then having technologists and business teammates coming together and saying, what's the art of the possible that you can now apply through these advancements in technology to these activities and tasks? So you can go after the problem sets that are taking up 20% of your time, 25% of your time. And now if you can make that part 50% more productive, now you're talking about 10% to the bottom line, right? Now we're talking about real numbers. Mm-hmm. I think we have to just all elevate. The technologists have to elevate to understand business activities and tasks. The business teammates have to elevate to understand the art of the possible. And the best way to do that is kind of bringing together more and more of them into these kind of innovation and ideation sessions.
Yeah. I think you are calling out such an important point around there is this, everyone's enamored with, oh, we got to find a way to use AI. And I work across all of our business teams, and everyone wants to find something to do with AI. When in reality, you're exactly right. We have to flip it and say, what are the most important problems for us to solve, right? What are those things that are going to transform the company, deliver fantastic ROIs, but start with the problem, don't start with the technology. And to the degree that we can get all of our business partners thinking that way, because it ends up being, you know, a very collaborative approach to the problems we need to solve, the value we're going to create, and then how the tech enables it. That embedding that mindset in your organizations is critical for you to be successful.
So once you get there, how do you decide, you know, build versus buy? I mean, how do you decide where to go?
Yeah, so I'll share my perspective, but I think it is a case-by-case basis. I think understanding we live in a world now where I don't think there's one clear answer. It's about creating ecosystems. And so it can be ecosystems with multiple cloud partners, multiple tech partners, internal, and really finding for each problem that you're trying to solve, take the time to go through that evaluation. Is it a build by partner rather than just leaning towards your preference? Ultimately, you'll end up with a much more compelling ecosystem of capabilities if you take the time to do that.
And that's why the enablement layer that I talked about earlier is particularly important, right? Because it allows you that flexibility to decide when you're going to build, when you're going to buy, when you're going to change what you're buying. So getting that part right will go a long way towards not being stuck on any one of these models.
Yeah, particularly at a time that things are changing, to your point, on a daily basis, right? Yeah. I think our general strategy is if it's truly commodity, we're not going to go try to build commodity things. On the other hand, more and more of those things, the customer experience actually matters. The user experience matters. Yeah. And the more it really matters to the customer that the data is right, it's protected, it's secure, you've looked at the model to make sure there's no bias, the more that it sounds like it's a differentiator, that's where probably we lean to building. And if it's more and more that it smells like it's commodity, you pretty much buy, and to Ravi's point, you just ideally abstract it so you can make those decisions.
Now, Hari, where do you see the technology going? Like, what would you like it to do that it's not currently doing?
I think it is very fast to prototype things right now.
Okay.
You can like do POCs up the storm, right? You can kind of go in there and, you know, I haven't written code in a long time, but I could probably go home and cook up something in like an hour. Nice. That's so easy. But commercializing is a different story. And commercializing involves lots of things. You know, what are your guardrails? How do you make sure the thing is performing as you expect it to this week versus last week? Is it going off the rails because 7 other questions got asked, right? How do you scale this for volume? What is the cost of deployment? Back to what's the ROI on the thing? There's a lot of things. So I think having better frameworks, both within companies around governance and systemic frameworks around guardrails and transparency and instrumentation and data privacy, I think there's a lot to be. I mean, it's night and day from what it was 3 years ago. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we sought to build 2 years ago that have already become commodity. 2 years from now, some of the other new things are going to become commodity. We just have to keep a close eye, but there's a long way to go, easier to prototype, easier to do proof of concept, much more difficult to commercialize at large scale right now.
Perfect. And Ravi, I'll pass along the question from the audience. What's next for AI? What do you see coming up next?
I think there are 2 things at least on our radar. One got mentioned earlier, the notion of autonomous agents. And I think there is a journey from how AI is being used today with a human in the loop for point activities to something that over time evolves into multiple related things being put together by autonomous agents. But it'll be a journey. I think for a while there'll be humans in the loop. We'll have to get confident. So imagine in our case, not only at some point you could check your membership rewards balance, or you could ask about your options for travel, you could book a travel. What if you could all say like, hey, if I had enough points, you know my preferences, book my ticket, right? And it books a Delta ticket. So there is a journey there that's exciting, but it'll take time, and there is certainly human in the loop for a while. The other thing I would say is the marriage of AI capabilities with data that customers entrust firms with. You have to earn that trust to have the data. We are fortunate as Amex to have great breadth and depth of data that we are trusted with, but you have to use it for the benefit of the customer, and you have to use it consistent with your brand.
Perfect. And Jody, I'll end with you. What are you excited about? Where do you see it going?
Well, I guess, not to repeat what others have said, I'll come up with something different. I think if I look at a company like Kroger, and maybe at many of your companies, some of the most impactful things we do are at the enterprise level. They cross domains in the organization. It's bringing marketing, merchandising, supply chain together. Today, it is a challenge to leverage AI across domains, to have a multi-domain approach. So I'm hopeful in the next couple of years, we are going to have much more elegant solutions that can really enable bigger experience changes, bigger business model changes, because they actually cross domains.
Excellent. Thank you guys very much. One more time for our panel.